a little bit late. It is 1:42 p.m. and Monday, April 3rd, 2023, and you're at a Wausau Waterworks Commission meeting. Welcome, everyone. We do have a quorum, but we are missing 2 members. One is joining us via WebEx, but cannot vote as per our council rules. The first item on our agenda is to approve the minutes of the March 7th, 2023 meeting. I have a motion by Commissioner Robinson and a second by Alder Herbst. Mr. Robinson.
There is in the minutes, there was a motion to gratify. I think we want to probably change the gratify to our ratify.
Some days it can be the
editorial.
same thing, but thank you. We can update that spelling or typo, I guess. Anything else? Alrighty. All those in favor of approving the March 7th, 2023 meeting minutes can signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I am also an aye. That passes. Thank you. All right, moving on. Director's report. I will pass it over to Eric.
Yeah, so a lot of this is on our project updates for water and wastewater, as well as kind of a little bit of direction where staff is going with updating our job descriptions and proposing moving forward through the course of the year. So if you have any questions on any of this specific.
Mr. Robinson.
As it relates to the water treatment plant, where are we? I know that we continue to have some slippage, and we haven't had that request for a change in the final deliverable date. Can you give us an update as to where we are?
Actually, after I wrote this, we actually did get a submittal from the contractor. And we had a meeting, staff and engineers have a meeting to go over that. They basically requested the release of all the money except $100,000, which I don't think we're in favor of that, just because we still have items that are not operational fully. Everything from automation to mechanical. So we're still having issues at the plant. Yep. And we'll have to formally respond to that after we draft exactly what their request is. And then, as you know, the contract completion date that was set was February 9th. So, yep. And since that day, beginning February 10th, there's been liquidated damages being compiled since that day.
Eric, this is Jim. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, Jim.
On the landscaping plan, are you taking into account the fact that we may hopefully have a solar field in there at some point? And I wouldn't want the landscaping that we're putting in to interfere with that and have to be pulled out.
No, we're not working on that site at all, Jim. Okay. So I don't think we're going to have any impacts there.
Very good.
Ms. Herbst.
Yeah.
Question on the wastewater system technician. He's got down one applicant awaiting start date from Human Resources. Has that been?
You, Ben?
Sure. The job has been accepted, or the offer is made and accepted, just waiting on an official hire date
Okay.
right now.
Then what about the other applicants that were interviewed? Anything happening good there?
The interviews ended on last Friday, and we narrowed it down to two applicants. We have 2 positions open. We just have to make an offer
Okay,
at this point.
good. Fingers crossed.
Correct.
Thank you.
Anything else? Anything else you'd like to highlight?
I don't think so.
Okay, well then let's move on to item number 3, discussion and possible action on approving a communications plan for the private side lead service line replacement.
So, as you know, Clark Dietz, with some help from CDM Smith, has put together a LSL replacement plan for us, submitted to the DNR. And for 2023, the city council approved $500,000 in ARPA funds to replace private side lead services along our street reconstruction projects for this year. And along with that, the city's going to have to contract for that work on the private side, but we need to initiate a communications plan. And that's really what the presentation is for today and discussion is how we're going to go about approaching that and moving that forward. And then Tanya with Clark Dietz is here. Hi, Tanya.
Hi there. Thank you. Again, Tanya Westfall with Clark Dietz. We have Amru Atasi and Matt Benarski on WebEx today who helped put this together. So essentially what we're going to go over today is a summary and a little bit of more specific information that relates back to the LSLR plan that was submitted to DNR. That entire plan remains in draft form yet, waiting for DNR comments. However, the communication plan and outreach plan side of things is something that's been tested throughout the country, throughout the state, and so some of that information is reflected here. I'm going to turn it over to Amru here to run through the slide deck. Amru, are you on and ready?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. This is Amru Atasi with CDM. Can everyone hear me okay?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you're really loud.
Sorry about that.
Public
Great.
access is pleased, though, so please.
I'm going to flip to the, can I flip the slides or do I need to tell you?
You can click it there.
Okay.
The power button's on the,
Okay.
it's turned off by now.
It's pretty sensitive, so.
Okay, maybe you should just do it. All right.
I'll just do it. Just tell me when, you guys.
We are ready.
No problem. Thank you so much. So yeah, we've included some slides here just to walk through the public outreach process, communication process during private site replacement. And this is, as Tanya mentioned, built from the replacement plan that we've put together, but also based on our experience working across the country with communities on lead service line replacement implementation. So this slide here, the graphic really shows the ownership split between the city and the homeowner with regard to the lead service line, right? So you've got the water main, then there is the public side that's owned by the city or the utility, and then the private side. So our focus today is on the private side or the homeowner side because it does require homeowner input, approval to do that replacement. And that's why communication and outreach is very important to get the homeowners to consent to that replacement. Next slide, please. Okay. This is a graphic maybe familiar to you. This was included in the lead service line replacement plan. And it just shows the different outreach goals and methods that are recommended prior to LSLR, which is lead service line replacement, during replacement, and then post-replacement. So pre-replacement, we're trying to make the public aware of the dangers of lead, get them to understand that this is an opportunity to replace their lead service line, answer any questions or concerns they have. But the ultimate goal is to get as many people to sign up in the program or in the pilot project as much as possible. During replacement, we want to really focus on the construction aspects of things, any permitting related issues, getting the homeowners to sign a right of entry or a way to allow the contractor into their home. And then the last piece is post-replacement, which is making sure that the homeowner is going to follow through on the flushing instructions. If there's a filter to be provided, that is something that they know how to use, as well as any post-replacement sampling to collect that data and make sure that they understand what they need to do. So we'll dive in today, obviously, with the pre-replacement, and obviously, as the city continues to develop the inventory, that will be useful information, right? Because we want to gather information on the material of the service line. But then even during this pilot project, make sure that we communicate with the homeowners, get them to sign up. But then we also have to take into account this part number 3, which is part of the lead and copper rule revisions, which did include notifications and notices that are required as part of lead service line replacement. Next slide, please. So the strategy for success is to communicate, right? And so first we have to let homeowners get these notifications in their hands, understand what the messaging is, and then continue to develop outreach strategies and ways to get this information into the customer's hands. And we'll dive into each of these pieces on the next slide. So I would say this is probably, I know there's a lot of text, a lot of bullets on this slide, but it's really, I think it's if we were to summarize everything from the presentation today, it would be on this one slide. So pre-replacement, we want to make sure we add information on the project website, on the city's website, ultimately, you know, with a goal of having a dedicated website just for lead service line replacement. But for the purpose of this project, having something on the city's website so that residents impacted by the pilot project can receive information that's accessible on the website. We are working with Eric and his team on an FAQ specific to the project that would be delivered in person to the impacted residents. I noted here, you know, making sure that whether it's city staff or the Clark Dietz CDM Smith team, that we are provided with badges, make sure it's a, you know, homeowners feel comfortable and confident that the people knocking on their doors are legitimate and we're not you know, knocking on their doors for other purposes as we deliver this FAQ. And I have an example of what that FAQ looks like. We also want to have some public meetings just to give an overview of the project, how residents are going to be impacted. And it's also an opportunity to interact face-to-face with residents and answer any questions or concerns that they may have. And in addition to that, there could be additional outreach with folks that were not able to reach in person or did not attend the public meetings, perhaps calling them at a designated phone number, or potentially leaving them with additional door hangers. We see that as a very effective way to get people's attention. And any other local community groups that are already organized and have information that are able to reach those residents that these other methods did not work. And ultimately, the goal is to get as many people to sign up and sign up for the program and also sign this right of entry or ROE. It's basically a legal document that the homeowner is permitting the city or the contractor to go on their property for the purpose of lead service line replacement. So those are the pieces pre or prior to actually going out there replacing the lead service line. As we move into the lead service line replacement with the contractor, the outreach continues, right? We never give up on homeowners. We want to get as many people to sign up for the program as possible. And so even after the contractor is hired, we want to utilize the contractor as they start replacing lead service lines. Neighbors can see, hey, it's not that big of a deal, and it's a good thing to have my lead service line be removed. So we can utilize the contractor and the RE inspection team to get more and more people to sign up for the program. And then we move into a pre-construction site visit. This is to see how the lead service line enters their home. Are there any obstructions or landscape features or anything that need to be taken into consideration, and addressing those concerns with the residents on site. Then we have what's called a homeowner agreement form. The idea behind this is now we know exactly how construction is going to be done, what landscape features may be impacted. This is to make sure there are clear lines of delineation of what is going to be taken care of by this construction project versus by the homeowner. Are there any pre-construction photos or videos, existing conditions? You know, sometimes we go in and there's a crack in the in the basement wall or something. We want to capture those things and document them in the homeowner agreement form, so all parties are aware of these pre-existing conditions. Then we provide the homeowner with flushing instructions and filters. And then sometimes we see some communities have some type of a hotline or phone number to call and answer any questions or concerns, or to allow more people to sign up. And then after the lead service line has been replaced, we'll continue with outreach to address any concerns, capture any lessons learned, document where the service line was replaced, the material, the size, any other construction documentation. The lead and copper rule revisions does require utilities to offer the homeowners a post-replacement sample 3 to 6 months after replacement. And so while this is not required at this point, because it's not required until the lead and copper rule revisions go in effect next year, but it is something that should be considered as part of this pilot, just to see how the process works. And then finally, for those that the city is not able to convince to be part of this program, we do recommend some type of a waiver documenting that this program was offered to somebody and they declined, so that for your record keeping, there's a waiver that they that this homeowner signed. Again, the goal is to get as close to 100% as possible with participation, but there are going to be some homeowners that just refuse to let anybody into their home, or may have other concerns and therefore may ultimately sign a waiver for not participating. And then on the next slide, we do have some examples of these materials that are included in here. This is an FAQ that CDM Smith developed last year for the city of Racine Water Utility, in their lead service line replacement. This is meant to be kind of a trifold FAQ. We are working with Eric and his team to put one similar to this that's specifically for your community, for your project. It allows homeowners to direct questions to there's contact information, but also see responses to some of the questions that are frequently asked. And then on the next few slides, we do have examples of other outreach materials that are prepared. This is another kind of a flyer that's put together on how to flush the service line after replacement. On the right, some lawn signs, just notifying the homeowners that, hey, this project is going to happen. And then this information can be provided both in English and Spanish, and it can also be translated to other languages that you may have depending on the community. This is one I like to include that we recently did for another community, and it just shows, in addition to frequently asked questions, but we sort of included information about what is expected for, people are concerned, hey, how's my lawn going to look at the end of this? What part of my lawn is going to be disturbed? And so some of this information can be included at public meetings, door hangers, etc. The idea is to address concerns before these questions do come up. And this is just an example door hanger for one of the programs we're doing with the City of Chicago. Leaving it at the door. People can see this information, and that way if they have any questions, there's a QR code to a website that they can go, and there's more information about the program and how they can sign up. The ROE or even the homeowner agreement form, those can also be provided on the website so people can sign up automatically to be part of the program. I think this is just more of a backup slide just to kind of show the level of participation that can be provided. But I think you've seen this before. Certainly the idea is that for this pilot project, the city wants to provide as much support as possible to the homeowner, but it's something to obviously keep in mind in the overall program. But yeah, happy to answer any questions on any of the information provided here, or any clarifications. Again, some of these slides are kind of left, more backup slides.
Sure.
But if you want to go back, sorry, to the slide that had the list of questions or the list of all the bullets on it. Yep, that would be slide number 6. Yep.
So I'm going to add a little bit to that one once you get back there, specific to your program. So the ultimate goal here is to develop some best management practices, learn a little bit more about homeowner feedback, public feedback, any number of things to pilot this, so when your full program launches, potentially next year, we've sort of worked out some of the kinks. I know Mr. Force had some questions about how we would have a better understanding of what questions people might ask. The frequently asked questions literature that's being put together comes from other communities, what people had an interest in. Amru noted the restoration requirements and restoration process that another community had. That's a big one that has come out of past projects. So that's been added to some of the communication channels. In this project in 2023 is your chance to gather that a little bit more and have a little more robust piece as you move forward. As you move your entire plan forward over the next number of years, this is meant to be dynamic. Every year you'll learn a little bit more perhaps, and then add to the scope of the project in terms of your communication and what you need to learn. Amru also mentioned translating. We talked about Spanish and Hmong in that regard, and we'll work with Dale at Department of Health Services to help distribute, work on some of these literature pieces. One of the other things that's specific to WASA is we understand your website is perhaps going through some changes or some updates. To that end, it's by design, you couldn't necessarily read all of the text in these examples because they're for other communities, right? So when your outreach material gets put together, the idea is to have something more general in nature about your LSLR program to sit on your website that could sit there related to today's program, next year's, what you intend to do, and that could sit there. In addition to that, we would have some outreach and FAQ for these projects in particular this year. So this is piggybacking on the city's capital improvement projects for Henrietta and 10th, because those were already in your pipeline. So we're playing catch up a little bit here, trying to get the comm plan put together and work with the funding that you've made available to help on the private side LSLs. Ideally, you would work in kind of parallel with your city engineering team to do this a little bit in advance or while they're working on it. So one of the things in terms of public outreach that was mentioned was public meetings. Those are anticipated probably something like mid-May, one for each of the projects you have going on. The contractors haven't had their pre-construction meetings yet, so the schedule will get nailed down a little bit more when we have that information. So there's some gaps still here in the full scope of this, but what's happening sort of post-haste is the frequently asked questions, working with the city kind of hand in hand, looking at what you've used previously for outreach and entry forms and kind of adapting your existing templates to add this piece to it. So we're trying to not recreate things that you've already done, and working with city staff as much availability as they have to help move this along. There's a lot of technical support happening through GIS and through engineering to sort of balance the efforts here.
All right, are there any questions? Mr. Robinson?
So questions, the timeline. So are we looking only at Henrietta and 10th, or which projects are we looking at? And if you can answer that first, and then.
Yeah, we're looking at Henrietta and 10th and then one block of Grant Street. So we're looking at, 90-some service lines for 2023.
So you're dealing with two neighbor groups that really aren't functioning. So will we be working then with Hawthorne Hills? When I started looking at this, you've got one elementary school with Hawthorne Hills. You've got the schools which are missing in here. I know the county's in the same boat as the city relative to the website redesign. But are you going online approximately June 1st?
I got to get a detail on when that's happening.
But I think that that's going to complicate things in trying to set it up for, if we're switching our web pages, it's going to complicate it. But how are we dealing with the issues of, so I'm doing all this these knocking or these drop-offs, and I'm dealing with tenants versus landlords. So how do we reconcile that difference? Because ultimately, it's the landlord that's going to have to give you the access for the work. And what sort of outreach are we planning with the landlord associations and others? And I think that's something we might want to get going on soon, because I can be a tenant and say, yeah, I want my lead line replaced, but I don't have any authority to give you that permission.
Sure. So what's happening right now at the city level is GIS staff has put together a list of property owners. So they'll receive mailings, and they'll be face-to-face, door contact, door hangers with the tenants. Amru, if you could weigh in a little bit more on sort of best practices and what's worked the best in other communities when you have a tenant situation, I think that would help.
Yeah, we've seen that quite a bit, and so what we do, we have to reach out both to the landlord.
Uh-oh.
Oftentimes, we knock on the door, sign up. Ultimately, that right of entry form, and actually there's line items for signatures by both parties, because we don't want the homeowner to come back and say, why did you alter something? So the outreach we would have. So hopefully from your customer billing records, if you have the contact information, we want to reach out to both in this case.
Yeah, I think one of the things with that, we need permission for both, right? Permission from the owner, the landlord, and then the tenant would have to give us authorization to come in, depending on their lease and stuff. So, but you bring up a good point, John, on the meeting with the landlord associations, things like that, and in short time as well as trying to meet with, get as many of the people in the neighborhoods as well. We had, a positive thing is over the last couple of weeks, we have had a couple people come into engineering on those projects and ask about lead service lines. So I think people are aware that it has been happening in the city, and I think that we do at least have a couple right now that are interested enough to where they're actually taking time to come in and talk to us. So
I would encourage you too to work with WIPs and the H2N, relative to people, just giving them a heads up, because that will get into, as part of that's my district, and so we can help you with some of that outreach.
Great.
Current or former.
okay.
Other questions?
This is Jim.
Yep.
I think overall a good job of putting a comprehensive plan together. I still feel that we would be more successful if we took this communications plan and did what you just did today, go over it with maybe a task force made up of a member of the Water Commission, maybe somebody from the city, maybe a landlord, or a member of the Landlord Association, and maybe one or two homeowners in the areas that have been targeted, just to make sure that the media that we're proposing to use is the right media for this community, because they do differ from place to place, whether the message is right on. It troubles me a little bit that we put frequently asked questions and answers together before we really ask the folks who will be impacted by our work what their questions are. Sure, some of them are the same as you had in Racine or any other community, but there may be some questions that are specific to Wausau that we need to be aware of. So just going over this plan with a small group to kind of test the media that's being proposed, test some of the messages that are being proposed, to see if there are any differences in the Wausau community and in the Wausau response. When we say public meetings, I have to say, I don't think we've had very good luck with public meetings. The solar panel public meetings really weren't successful in my view. We've also come off this issue with the school consolidation plan, where the public is complaining vehemently that they weren't involved in that planning, they weren't informed properly. And so we have that issue on the table as well. And I'd hate to see our lead service line program suffer consequences because of either of those two events. So on the question of public meetings, I'd like to hear from some of the citizens involved. Is a public meeting the right way to go, or are there other avenues of getting this information out to them that would be more effective? I also, that's one point. The second point, very quickly, did we learn anything, Eric, from our work on the west side or in any of the other neighborhoods where we've replaced that service lines as far as communications are concerned? Were there anything that pops out at us that we should have done that we didn't do in those cases?
Yeah, Jim, I think a lot of the things with those projects over the last 4 or 5 years that we've been replacing, I think one of the biggest components that was missing was the continued communication. We would reach out once and then later on reach out again, and then there really wasn't any communication. So I think the continuity of communication and consistency through the project is going to be important. And so that was one big takeaway. And we hope that this plan is going to address that, at least how we have it laid out right now. And right now, just because of the timeline, we're not only providing education generally to the public, but we're also at the same time going to be contacting homeowners on these projects, so there's a couple things happening at the same time. Where in future projects there may be more general communication initially, and then we'll work into project specific. But in this case, we're kind of doing them in parallel.
Okay, well, I would just hate to see anything backfire on us and cause a community controversy over this.
Yeah.
We don't need that. We want to be successful, we all do. So that's the reason behind my comments.
So to your point, Jim, about the FAQ, right now the FAQ does just have general information learned from other places and a little bit here back from your staff. It hasn't been developed yet. It's in draft form and it should be done in the next week or two. So if there are some people we could consult with to weigh in on that, there's certainly a little bit of time to do that. And I think really that the difference between talking to you this month and last month in time is that winter hasn't let go yet, so the contractor schedules are pushed out a little bit, so that gives us a little bit more time.
With the FAQ, it's delivered in person. So when we knock on people's doors and the FAQ is, and if there are additional questions or concerns that staff goes, and you bring an excellent point, Jim. Sometimes public means it's we've had those and participation is not correct.
Amru, you're cutting out quite a lot.
Yeah, you are, to me as well.
But
Okay.
But the idea is you're communicating, you're using all because some people aren't going to, when they're not going to answer the phone, but they may want to come to with me.
So I think you're cutting out a little
Ask that
bit.
question. So every method so far is door-to-door knocking with the FAQ, and then also with reaching people via phone.
I think generally what we just heard was you telling us that we are using this as the first draft and we'll iterate over time, and we're not just dropping off a random sheet of FAQ. We're interfacing with folks. So
Correct.
I saw a question from Commissioner Robinson.
I just want to caution you not to say, or rely too heavily upon the door knocking and dropping them off based on, if you're doing it during the day, you're going to, at best, on a great day, get about a 30, 40% at-home rate. So if you're going down Grand Street, there's an awful lot of rentals.
Yeah.
In there, you go into every one of those rental units, and even in the Henrietta, there's some. So you're going to have to really have a multi-pronged approach on getting it out there. You're going to have some understanding about the number of units in each of those buildings to make sure you're getting as much word out as you can. And I would imagine your GIS system will be able to help with some of that. But, I would also make sure that you're engaging the health department, early in this effort to see what sort of strategies they have from their health educators and others, and how you can communicate with that population. But it's worth a try just to see how it'll work. And I think what I would like to see at the end of the period is sort of a debrief of the commission, so we can look at it, because this is a resource-intensive approach, and whether we can continue to replicate that, or are there some best practices that are much more efficient than others as we go into the future, and we try to look at a universe of 8,000 lines, and how are we going to do that. So I would hope that we'd have a debrief and have an opportunity to get some feedback.
Great.
But are you looking for a motion to adopt this or implement this, or we're just moving ahead with it?
We were planning on just moving ahead, but,
And one of the suggestions, I would encourage you to reach out to the local elected officials in those areas, and there are two
For sure.
council members, and make sure that they're informed. And you might want to also just reach out to the corresponding county board soups,
okay.
because they can have some contacts in there from the county health perspective.
Okay.
Got it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Alrighty, so the next topic is item number 4, discussion on future educational presentations and policies the commission would like to consider. This is coming from the fact that we have a lot of stuff going on, and a lot of things that we could talk about or would rather not. So maybe we can just start having this conversation. But before we start, I just want to make sure we're talking about topics that we would like to explore in the future, and we're not actually talking about the topics themselves, because then we run into an issue related to that. So we'll be keeping a list, if that's good. So yes, Commissioner Robinson, you can kick us off.
So, this discussion on the lead service line sort of brought to mind, what is the regulatory changes that are in the works that are sort of known or near completion that will be affecting the utilities operations in the future, both from the water and wastewater side, and what sort of implications might those have on our operations and budgets, and which are required and in which are best practices, because there's a difference. I think another one would be, where are we with some of our studies in terms, we keep talking about the lead service line, corrosion control, but maybe an update on the scope of those projects, who's involved in them, what's the deliverable at the end of the day, and what, if it's staged and stepped, what step are we in, and what's the next step, and what are the long-term financial obligations on it. It would be helpful. I'll just take, to get an update on I'd like to hear from both our experts across the table on what went well with the facility upgrades, and what challenges are posed by the new facilities that we perhaps didn't anticipate, and are there some policy ramifications associated with any of those challenges going forward that you would need commission involvement in? Is it supply side? Are there supply side issues that change the way we go about budgeting or approaching bidding? We've continually seemed to have problems with getting enough bidders, but are there some opportunities or challenges out there, and are there some policy changes that we need to look at in the context of the commission?
Thank
I
you.
have a couple, if I can jump in.
Yep, absolutely.
Post GAC, I think we need keep track of what's happening with the PFAS issue and the PFAS in our system. We need to do more on finding the source of these contaminants. And I think we also need to closely monitor the fate of PFAS in our water and wastewater systems going forward. There's a lot of information coming on the scene now about where PFAS are coming from. For example, in California, they're finding a lot of PFAS in the sewers coming from household, dishwashing, clothing washing, that kind of stuff. So staying on top of the PFAS issue, I think, is one thing. I ask frequently and really don't get much of an answer. I'd like to know, or I'd like to discuss, or have a plan of some kind about the disposition of the old water plant property. And then the third thing is energy efficiency. I know we had an excellent discussion from Johnson Controls last week, and I know we've considered solar at the water plant, and I hope we stay on that. Don't give it up. But I think both at the wastewater and at the water plant side, we need to be really conscious of energy-saving methods and procedures that we might be able to adopt to basically fulfill what the city and county both, I think, want to do in terms of increasing energy efficiency of public utilities. That's it for me.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else? I think probably something that I'll call on you in 1 second, that we can probably talk about very quickly is the national push for lead service line replacement. We're anticipating some good news coming tomorrow, but I think that will push us a little harder to get going and figure out how to replace those. So I think that'll be a good conversation for a really quick turnaround meeting, probably. So,
That was-
Mr. Robbins. Oh, you got
That
it.
was it.
Yep. It also strikes me that sometimes we have conversations that might be adjacent to this commission that maybe we haven't invited you to be a part of, although sometimes folks have inside knowledge. Recently, we had the DNR present at our city council meeting to talk about responsible party, but maybe it's worth our time to talk about that as a commission as well, because we know that the process is slow and sometimes understanding is the best way to reach that. Mr. Robinson, did you?
I would be happy to try to lead that, given my,
Excellent.
as you go through it. I'm afraid that the DNR's resources are somewhat limited, and
Sure.
on May 2nd, we're hoping to have a speaker at that PFAS seminar, and maybe we can tap into them. And I know there's some folks in New York and in Milwaukee that may be good resources for us.
And maybe you just struck something with me. In general, a lot of us are attending a variety of conferences, whether that's staff, whether that's us. Maybe we need to make a special, like if you attend something, could we have an educational presentation on our agenda to just get everyone up to speed on some of that so we're sharing it? I know we've done some updates, but maybe just making sure that we're always doing that would be good too. Understanding where our interest organizations and people lobbying on behalf of, utilities, where their head is at, because it can sometimes be different than where our heads are at. So it'd be good to know all of that stuff. What else? Anything else? Okay, well, I think we've got a couple of good ideas to start planning ahead of time, so thank you. I guess the last item on first of all, our next scheduled meeting is for May 1st, but I did want to make you aware that we're thinking that based on some of the national news we'll hear tomorrow, we're going to want to have a special meeting scheduled the week of the 17th, so make sure you are checking your email, and we can get together. We're hoping to meet with the Finance Committee. This might be breaking news for everybody in this room except for me and Eric. So keep that in mind. But I guess outside of that,
Question before you adjourn, Mayor, I do have a question.
okay.
Off the back, are we doing rain barrels this spring?
Are we doing rain barrels?
No, there hasn't been any unless I get direction to move something forward, if that's something that you're interested in. The first year we did really well. Last year, was it last year we did
Yeah.
those? Okay. Yep. And then not as much participation, so it seemed to decline, but if you'd like to continue to pursue that, I'd be happy to start preparing that.
Okay, maybe we can talk about that at our future meeting. Thank you. All right, last item on our agenda is, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. I have a motion by Commissioner Robinson and a second by Alder Herbst. All in favor can signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that passes. Thank you very much, everyone.